Today is the feast of Pope St. John Paul II, and earlier we heard about his faith and spirituality, but he also played a major role in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe. Earlier this week, we spoke with the author of a book on John Paul II's place in history. Joining us now is Paul Kengor, professor at Grove City College and author of A Pope and a President, John Paul II, Ronald Reagan, and the Extraordinary Untold Story of the 20th Century. Paul, welcome back. Always great to see you. John Paul II was elected Pope in 1978, as you know, of course. And not only was he from Poland, but he was also the first non-Italian Pope in more than 450 years. Can you talk about the significance of that, Paul? And also, what was the reaction among the communist leaders in Eastern Europe at the time?
Yeah, it was amazing. In fact, that's now the day that we recognize as his feast day. And he was, I mean, that he came in October, and then immediately after that, about 1 week later, gave his statement about "Be not afraid," right? And the Soviets were very fearful of this because they realized right away that this was a complete game changer in the Cold War. And yeah, Tracy, there had been nothing but Italian popes for 455 years, which is amazing. I mean, it's like twice the life of the United States. So, I mean, the Pope had been Italian. So to have the first Slavic Pope ever, the first Pope ever from Poland, and Poland being right smack in the middle, really the heart of the communist bloc, the one country in the communist bloc in the Soviet Empire behind the Iron Curtain where the war on communism, where the war on religion by the communists had utterly failed. I mean, this was, they knew that this was a big deal. And you know, on the other side, people like Ronald Reagan, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, they understood too that this was a big deal for another reason, that they saw as, wow, this is our big opportunity finally to try to take down and defeat atheistic Soviet communism.
Yeah, and another thing I want to talk about, too, is that famous trip that he took to his homeland in the summer of 1979. Do you think that played a role in the end of communism? And also, let's talk about why fighting communism was so important to him.
Yeah, in fact, it's been called 9 days that changed the world, right? June 2nd to 11th, 1979. And at that moment, and Tracy, after he had been selected as Pope, a few months into this, few weeks into this, probably a few days really, but his advisors said, okay, which country would you like to choose to go to first for your first foreign visit? And he said, Poland. And they said, well, you know, Holy Father, that might kind of rock the boat. I don't know. I don't know if you can do that. The Polish authorities were already saying no. The Soviet authorities were saying no, or trying to say no. Leonid Brezhnev had already called the Polish leader and said, you've got to stop or veto any visit by this new Polish Pope. And the Polish communist leader said, well, his name was Edward Garrick. He said, how can I do that? He said, my people are Polish. How can I say no? How can I say no to the Pope? And Brezhnev told him, you find a way to do it. You find a way to do it, or else. And he tried. He couldn't veto it. And John Paul II insisted on going. And when he got there, you know, they realized how, you know, just what a mortal threat this was. There were massive numbers of people. I mean, masses of hundreds of thousands of people. Crowds of millions of people turned out. You had the Polish secret police gathering around with automatic weapons around the outside of the crowd. And it was there that John Paul II told the crowd, he said, be not afraid. You know, be not afraid, those famous words of the angel Gabriel to Mary at the Annunciation, the words that appear throughout the New Testament. And, you know, to them, it gave them the courage that they needed. And again, the Soviets, on the other hand, were very afraid.
I tell you, that is such an amazing story, and so many stories about him are just incredible. I know that you've written that, quote, despite his own pleas of humility, St. John Paul II really deserves great credit for his role in providing a powerful push to the end of communism in Eastern Europe. I know you touched on that a little bit. Do you think that he actually receives the credit, though, that he deserves?
Yeah, I think he really does, Tracy. In fact, if you ask most people, give me a list of the 4 or 5 figures that were central to the end of the Cold War, you always hear Ronald Reagan, Mikhail Gorbachev, Margaret Thatcher, maybe Lech Walesa, Václav Havel, maybe Boris Yeltsin, but John Paul II is always on that list. And I should point out here too, it's ironic. Here we are in 2021, and we're talking about this because of the feast day of John Paul II on October 22nd. But it's also, it's 30 years. It'll be the 30th anniversary of the collapse of the Soviet Union, which actually happened on Christmas Day in the West, 1991, when Mikhail Gorbachev called George H.W. Bush and he said, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas, and I want to tell you that I'm resigning as head of the USSR. And at that point, he pretty much formally resigned the leadership of the USSR and the country itself. And it's also 2021, it's the 40th anniversary of, in 1981, John Paul II was shot. May 13th, 1981, the feast day of Our Lady of Fatima. And it was there that he was convinced, as he said, one hand fired the bullets and another hand deflected or guided the bullets. And it was his survival at that point in 1981 that made possible those events in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Well, Paul, I tell you what a wonderful conversation we had today. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Paul Kengor, professor at Grove City College and author of A Pope and a President. We appreciate it. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Tracy.